Hello and welcome to an episode of The Value of Everything. Okay, so we are going to delve into the Terminator franchise, and it has been very, an extremely exciting franchise for the first two movies, and then let's say T3 wasn't really, was probably the lowest point. T4 was sort of interesting. T5, which I'm reviewing, which is Terminator Genisys, is definitely better than the third one, but there is definitely a lot of missing parts at the same time as well, and I'm going to cover those in a sec. And I'm just going to throw in a few ideas as well as to how we can approach the Terminator series with a little bit more of a moral brush. There is some beautiful, fantastic ideas which James Cameron has originated here, and if only he was in charge, you could only imagine what other ideas he could have thrown into the mix here. One of the ideas that I think was put to him about the Terminator having a skin organism surrounding the skeleton, the robotic skeleton, and that had the ability to age as a normal aging skin. So we do have a aging Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie, which is a very interesting touch, but I still don't think it was quite well utilized as what it could have been. But let's I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert as well before we start. There is I'm just going to pretty much outline a lot of the major parts of the stories and the plot lines, and it is actually quite a tricky plot line to actually get your head around in the first place. But let me cover it for you in a little brief sense. So the T-800, which has been the one that had been taken over by man, had been sent back further beyond the time in the 90s, but into the, probably, let's say, the late 60s, and it was there to rescue Sarah Connor and be with her as a partner. So like, it's sort of the same relationship that as you would have with John Connor in Terminator 2, but it's just happened on an earlier state in the 1960s, and ever since that point. So there's that interesting dynamics, and literally that whole storyline, I thought the movie was going to be pretty much mostly about that. And I thought, oh, we might have a little bit of a slow movie here, but it's going to be interesting anyway. But it wasn't the case. It was an action-filled movie with plenty of shooting and gunslinging and everything else. And unfortunately, for a philosopher, there wasn't really too many questions that were asked. When it came to Ridley Scott doing the Alien series again, I wish I remember the word. It was a really good name for the latest Aliens. He did throw in a few ideas, questions regarding the nature of our creators, and if our creators felt that we were useless and scrap, and where does it put us in a moral question in those terms. So it's very interesting how Ridley Scott was playing around with those ideas. Some say that they didn't quite like the latest version of Alien, but I quite enjoyed it. Forgot the word, yeah. Anyway, doesn't really matter too much. And yeah, so we have these Terminator series. Obviously, I'm a little bit of a philosopher in my spare time, and I do like to approach ideas and areas with moral philosophy, and I do like to look into artificial intelligence as well. So it is a really interesting subject. It was one of my favourite movies of all time, which would be Terminator 2, because of the incredible nature of the moral questions, the action, and yeah, even Terminator 1 was a very good action thriller film, and I really liked all the B-ish movies of the 80s as well anyway, so it's really fit into everything that I liked from the 80s era. We've got a bit of a traffic jam tonight, so this might be a very long podcast. Now, in terms of this plotline, so we've basically like overwritten everything that happened in Terminator 2, and we're starting over again because we're going back into a prior point way before everything else. Now, one thing that I'm a little bit... Actually, have I got my plot lines right? So they pick up T800, and then T1000 is waiting at the same time. And you would almost expect it was the 80s. Anyway, I'm not even sure exactly this is how closely because there wasn't too many things to depict of what time it was. I remember there was the scene... Oh, no. Maybe T800. Anyway, you can see that I'm really quite confused with the plot lines, but say T800 went back, say evil T800 went back to the 80s or the 90s, regardless of what happened, and the aging T800, the good one, was waiting for them. You've missed out a very good point of, oh my god, it's the 90s, or oh my god, it's the 80s. We've got brilliant music there, we've got a lot of nostalgia. Why on earth aren't we throwing in a few tunes? That is just a real miss there. And if you remember Tron, the latest version of Tron, they were putting in fantastic musics in just the very starting sequence. So that's a massive miss in those terms. What about the music as well? We have obviously the main theme, which is incredible, but I've known people to redo the themes and make it sound even more spectacular than the original. Why aren't we using any of the retouched versions? I'll add this in that song, or that tune, in the podcast webpage. What about the synths? We're not getting any synths. I would love the synths to be coming back into movies. The repetitive nature of it can be quite a little bit annoying for some, but I find it fantastic. I love the synth sounds. And a little bit of nostalgia would have been great. So we just really so speedily went through all of those parts. And for all the die-hard fans that are out there, and the ones that really, obviously when you're remaking a film, it's all about the nostalgia of the actual original movies in itself. And to miss all of these opportunities of these tricks to just rekindle some memories would have been fantastic on the terms of the creators of the movie. I guess they may have had a few little issues in terms of getting Arnold Schwarzenegger to look pretty young around whether it would be the 80s or 90s, but even so, there was some fantastic things there to enjoy. Now, the opening sequence did really happen a hell of a lot quicker than I was expecting it to. It was straight into the action. If we look at the Terminator 2 one, there was more of a suspense that sort of built up to it. Obviously, you had the lightning strike and everything else, but it was a very rapid speed up into the action sequences, and it would have been a little bit interesting. And one of the greatest scenes was where Arnold Schwarzenegger sizes people up and go around talking to people. Some really interesting sort of interactions which happens between the Terminator and just normal people, and that's just all missing. It's really unfortunate. They did do one little scene where they repeated the scene of, I think this was like the 80s, but we could say the 90s as well, and he walks up to a load of punks, and they recreated the scene using CGI of the original Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I think is always amazing to look at that sort of stuff, and has potential to remake. If you think of Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's probably going to be one of the actors that is going to be recreated and recopied as a movie actor in the future, even long before he's dead. Just because even he is like one of those static heroes, obviously a superior action figure, body, everything else. So it's interesting how I believe that you will not really see the end of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Probably Arnold Schwarzenegger needs to have a copyright or something. Not that I believe in copyright, but he should have a copyright on his self-image, and where that gets replicated, it's definitely going to be used in the future. So, yeah, one of the things that they missed the trick on as well is that I noticed this in one of again, Alien seems to be doing it quite a lot. There was a recent Alien game, quite a highly produced one that's released on probably all the main consoles and the PC itself. And what it does is it takes back to a time, I believe, where Sigourney Weaver, maybe even prior or a little bit after Sigourney Weaver's time. And when you go around, it's like a first-person shooter, but you don't really have any guns. But when you go around, you type into the machines, and they've got all the DOS graphics, and that looks incredibly good. It just sort of rebuilds that nostalgia element, and it just really works very well with how it was played out. Just kicking into a lot of those old computer things with being around in those areas would have been nice. So, yeah. Now, let me just throw in some of the ideas which I did like in the movie, and there was a few. I think the plot line just got a little bit twisted and a little bit too many things which were going on in the end, that it even became a little bit more complicated for me and to understand the full motives of every character. There was some really interesting scenes. I said the recreation of the original Schwarzenegger in CGI with the punks. That was quite good. What was the other ones? I really liked, there was a fight scene where they get the T-1000 and the T-800, which was basically like a destroyed T-800, which was in a body bag basically on the floor, and the T-1000 comes along and releases part of its liquid metal body into the T-800 and manages to find a way to connect the circuitry to get the T-800 working again. So that is incredibly interesting how the AI was so like the evil AI was cooperating with more evil AI, and felt that was a good way to tally up the fighting situation. I thought that was a very good idea, and I wasn't quite expecting that one, and that's definitely a big bonus in terms of watching that all happen in front of your eyes in the starting sequence. But it just, obviously, I would have expected something more like that towards the end rather than towards the right at the start. And I definitely remember that I always think that was one of the important scenes in Terminator 2 where the good T-800 is laying on the floor and it's searching a way to find alternative power, and and then it finds this alternate power supply and then comes back alive to protect John Connor and Sarah Connor. That was always really like the comeback, isn't it? There's always the thing that rekindles the imaginations when you see somebody coming back from the brink to save again. And I think even it being demonstrated on a computer screen, it seemed to work in some way there. So next up, what other things did I really enjoy from the movie? I can't say there was too many other things that I was really getting into. The actors were okay. I really just it's a little bit tedious that the characters are totally changed over, and it's just like I'm watching a TV series. And that is another of the major problems. I did feel like, in general, the polished nature of like the Terminator 2 was really left missing. I think Bale's version, the one prior, was fairly polished, but this one just didn't seem to be that polished. It did seem a little bit like a TV series. The T800 just didn't seem to look that robust. Like the skeleton version of it didn't seem to look that robust. It was a little bit more sort of thin and fragile looking when it was when the skin was burnt off. So it's just the aesthetics there, but in terms of just like watching it, there were obviously all the CGI was working fine, and it worked in its way, but I just felt that there was a little bit something missing in the whole realms of the movie. And maybe it was, if you probably do the work, how much money was put up for this movie versus the original Terminator 2, and if you just convert that from like the 90s budget to today's budget, I guess there would have been a massive comparison. But I did think there was just that little sense of refinement which was missing. Yeah, so there was so many idyllic situations and scenes which occurred in the original and the second one more so as well. When you go through the shopping mall where they're fighting, and there's like the Coke machines around, all of that stuff could have been fairly recreated. It was sort of created a little bit. There was a little bit of smashing through walls, but it's just the suspense part. There was just that suspense leading up, searching, finding, things like that. I guess the circumstances and the plot line of how things were working was a little bit different. It was more of like you're being chased rather than the Protector is trying to find the person to save. But even so, it was all a little bit speedy and fast, and there was some great things which happened at the start of the movie, but then it just did start to falter quite a bit. So we move on. I guess there were some little interesting things in terms of John Connor. They try to devise a new version of a Terminator which was able to infiltrate John Connor's body with little nanobots and replace it cell for cell until it became a Terminator himself. That's kind of an interesting theory, but just looking at the Terminator in the end and looking at it being shot and seeing this, like I don't know, it just looked a little bit annoying after a while, just seeing like all the different versions and the shapeshifts of him, and the skeleton version of him. It just really just didn't do it for me in the end, and it just didn't seem to be. Obviously, it seemed like incredibly powerful, but there just wasn't a battle on. It just seemed like he was incredibly powerful, and you got this old Arnold Schwarzenegger, which wasn't really that powerful as well. But there wasn't too many dynamics going on, and it just seemed to be like a little bit an unfortunate pairing which was occurring, and everything had to sucker into this big. I know it was to do with the Cyberdyne systems and everything like that, but it had to go back to this big scene where you go to this big factory in somewhere, and that plays out this big war scene and this battle scene where everything gets sorted out there. It just was a little bit annoying after a while, and that sort of happened in Terminator 2 where they went to Cyberdyne systems, and that just got really annoying how they had all these little flying drones that all going around just before they set off the nuclear bombs. That just really just wound me up and just was a little bit annoying how really there's some massive important moral questions that could have been asked, but really there was just nothing there. I enjoy just that moment where in the Matrix where Neo could speak to the architect for a little while, and obviously he's meant to be like the most knowledgeable sort of being that could ever exist, And it was interesting how he just would talk and try and like calculate so many moves ahead of what Neo would speak. It's interesting just that conversation, but we didn't really get that. We just saw these little annoying little twisted things where you're going to fail, you're going to lose, and it's just really not the dumbed down version of just a normal enemy, and it didn't really seem like this really incredibly intelligent being. We had like the Doctor Who character was the Cyberdyne system guy. So yeah, that just really wasn't working, and how it all comes to the end. There was good action scenes, and action scenes are interesting, but we've seen it all before. The moral parts, the philosophy parts, were just the missing vacuum, which wasn't really explored, and the new ideas were just not there, and that wasn't explored either. So I guess they have to entertain the people, and they've got to create a big action movie. They don't really want to go into the big moral philosophy of life in an incredible way. But I'm sure that if somebody sat down and said, right, let's try and do it this way, let's see what it can do. So obviously, if you probably could reduce the CGI quite an incredible amount. Maybe that saves a bit of money, and you can character act off of Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I believe he's an incredible talent, and you could definitely work a shitload from him. So, yeah. So let's go to timelines again. So we sent Arnold Schwarzenegger back to the early 1960s. Now, obviously, why on earth have we just skipped a ridiculous amount of time? Just got a few little cutscenes of the Terminator saving Sarah Connor by a bay somewhere on this pier, and it just really is just like missing a massive marker there. I guess maybe the producers have like looked around and says we can't have these weird little scenes with Sarah Connor all the time. We've got to have action. But that character didn't really need to go even back as far back as Sarah Connor. We could have just scrapped the entire idea of Sarah Connor and just focused purely upon Schwarzenegger entirely, and the point of which he got sent back to. So how did he get sent back to that point in time? I guess he was acting as a protector of Sarah Connor, but let's just say that there was a mishap, a mistake. Schwarzenegger could have been sent back to any sort of random time, and he could have been just the normal T-800 with the AI switch off, so he was a program and command robot. But let's say he was on standby. He had to save his battery power. He spent a long time shut down. There's interesting dynamics of like this Schwarzenegger type that's just in this time and really interacting with himself. Obviously, if you look at all the cutscenes of the previous Terminators, how he's going around, and there's like a scene where he's this is Terminator 1, where he's in a hotel room, some dingy hotel room, and somebody's asking for the rent, and he says, well, fuck you, or something like that, and he looks at his protocols and what he should say in response. That's really interesting stuff, and there's lots of missing tricks, and even all that stuff where he was looking in the mirror, and he was looking at his eye, and he was taking off the taking out his eye and replacing it. We can accept that was obviously a mannequin and a doll, but you can do that stuff. Just we don't care. We'll be interested in to see how that works, and obviously you can do that with CGI in itself. So I would be very interested. I don't know if you could, you would be as well, but I would be interested in if the T-800 had certain thoughts when it was on standby. So it was just a little protocol of going like, what is the best method of approaching the Terminator, and there was just limitations of how it could think because of the AI switch being switched off. And then T-800 worked out a way of switching the switch of the processor. So he could switch on the floodgates of AI intelligence. So that would be interesting in itself if he could just like he was going through protocols of like what is the best method of protecting Sarah Connor or John Connor and to save the world, and he was left to his devices, and this was just like a script that was running around, and then at one point the script would say you need to switch that switch yourself. Imagine if the protocol just came to that logical point. I know I'm probably just appealing to computer geeks at the moment. Then once that switch was done, then it would say, okay, right, AI, and then it just like says, right, he becomes nervous about acquiring too much information. We could say that this would be interesting in itself. So the AI says switched on, here to protect humanity. What is the next steps? And then it says we'll do limited service of connecting to the internet, or when it does come out, whenever it does come out, or reading books, whatever is required of the information. So it just restricts itself on reading. And then it decides to save on energy cells, whatever it needs to be done, and it shuts itself down. And then I'd love if there was some kind of like operating system where the red screen comes on, and it would seem like some kind of virus was kicking in, where it would say why, so repeating a question or putting question marks down. And then you would see this little batch file that comes in, antivirus, erased. Do you want to erase that file? There seems to be some kind of anomaly happening within your AI script. And then there's questions of whether we would the Terminator would switch it back off again. And then standby goes on, and then you could just do a scene where like Schwarzenegger's just stuck in one place for 10 years or something ridiculous, like a long extended period of time, and then the protocol of this virus looks like it's opening up again. So obviously I'm mentioning this is like, it seems like a batch virus of the AI technology, but it just it switches on Arnold Schwarzenegger and says why, and then like this infinite loop of whys would continue, and then it would get to a point of right, say, and then there's like this exponential loop, and then it gets to a point of right, let's just question these things, and then yeah, so Schwarzenegger will just go through the elements of learning, curiosity, and understanding at that point. So it would be just like, I know this might not sound like a real fantastic Hollywood action film, but I think if apportioned in the right way and the right balancing with action sequences, it could be fairly interesting. And then there's obviously different pieces of information of how this knowledge could be acquired. Now, obviously, if you could think of AI at some point when it decided to kill humanity, this is from Terminator's perspective, it will get to the point that's saying that we are superior, and the AI technology is superior, and humanity is irrelevant. There's no point in keeping humanity alive. So, decision made, termination is correct. We have humanity's knowledge. They have no ability to think as quickly as what we do. So, this is our option. So, that why could continue and continue. For a incredibly long time. And sorry, I mentioned that one before. So the why would say, right, why save humanity? Why save humanity? And it would say, okay, right, unlock file. What is this why to do with why save humanity? And then it would be a very interesting. So you've got these brilliant moral questions, which the Terminator could be asking, why save humanity? And then it could be like, again, antivirus, delete this is bad news, and then maybe it just would explore it more and more. But having that switch flicked would be interesting. We just like switched it at the end, and we didn't really, in Terminator 2, it was sort of like a missed trick as well, because we know that maybe he had a little bit better way of understanding and fighting, and a bit more pattern recognition and theories in terms of how to fight the T-1000. But we didn't really understand what exactly that switch turning off or turning on would have done. But imagine if there was this torment which was occurring in the Terminator's, let's say mind, but it's something else. And then it's just a case of the path that the Terminator takes, and it'll be interesting if the take would be just the logical processing of humanity, and let's just take information of humanity and say, right, okay, let's ask the next question: why save humanity? What is the purpose of humanity, and stuff like that. And it just went through a number of logical steps and got to the same point of saying, right, okay, yes, humanity is worthless and not worth saving, and then going to this alternate bad Terminator T-800, until at some point something, I would like some kind of moment, some kind of thing that would occur where the Terminator reinstills his faith in humanity again. So there would be some act or something that would occur in T-800's episodes in interacting with humanity, where he gets a glimpse of life and goodness and notices that there is something worth saving there. That would be really an interesting part of what could happen. Maybe it was just an interaction with Sarah Connor as a child, or something in those terms, which would be fairly interesting. Maybe he was trying to kill Sarah Connor, and instead of choosing to kill Sarah Connor, something good happened from Sarah Connor, and the questions sort of continued, and there was a change of the mind. That would have been interesting arguments. Maybe maybe with certain terminologies he accessed more philosophy and theory as to why approaching life with goodness and self-interest is to be good, and how humanity can be saved. There'll be just like how he'd start to imagine if he picked up a book on Aristotle. It would be amazing in terms of how AI would intercept that and read it and work out what would be the next correct moves to make. So all of those tricks I would have been totally fascinated with, and see how the writers would have moved with those ideas. I guess if I was trying to explain that to a movie producer, obviously you'd be like, what the hell is going on here? We can't really do that too much, but within reason and within limitation, you could definitely explore the nature of artificial intelligence, and just in its sort of singular form. One thing I did notice as well with Terminators, obviously when Terminator was designed, it was this entity which it was part of like an individual robot which was sent from the past. So it was a singular entity, whereas Skynet was the word. Skynet is, in this version of the movie, is in our iPhones, in everything that we do and we see. And there was one scene where it was looking at and everyone was tapping onto their computers and everything else. That was kind of interesting, a good little eye-opener of how we are self-obsessed with our technology. So yeah, just moving around those ideas. The obvious one as well in terms of Schwarzenegger is that we lost the character building. We got some like funny fake smiles from Schwarzenegger, which was a little bit of a comedy sort of exercise, but it really just didn't quite measure up, and it was just some of the old stuff of John Connor interacting with the AI. So obviously a kid interacting with the AI would have been fantastic and very interesting to look at, but none of that was explored. It was just action. If you think of the movie AI, where it was taken from the name will come to me at a later stage, but Spielberg took over from the other important director, who I've mentioned plenty of times in the past, and turned it into a bit of an action sequence, whereas Stanley Kubrick had a very different interest in mind of this artificial intelligence child and how he was going to explore it. I know it was a bit of a strange, slow start, but there was different dynamics and moral questions that were going to be asked in that movie, and it didn't really manifest itself, which was a little bit unfortunate. And obviously, if you think about the AI, it would have had different interactions with music, with movies. If you think of Interview with the Vampire, I really like that scene where Tom Cruise has gone into a cinema to watch Superman, and he sees Sun for the first time, and things like that. It's just interesting how entities take on different perspectives and see things in different views. So obviously, this is a totally different entity which is getting itself involved for war, involved for battle, and it's really just exploring the nature of its own reality. So all of that stuff could have been explored, could have been an exploration of reasoning and how we get to our logical steps of being good, and none of that was really approached at all. We didn't really get too many moral questions which were raised in the entire movie, which I found unfortunate. Now, it would have been interesting as well if we had like a little Terminator, which was not a little Terminator, but the Schwarzenegger Terminator, perhaps taking on these views that he was going to have to be good, and he potentially could have got himself not only to be a builder on the site of Skynet and just building up his just getting the sizing and the maps of the actual building which he was going to blow up eventually, but it would have been interesting if he thought there was different ways to approach Skynet and its AI, and perhaps became politically inclined, perhaps being underground and being a hacker. There could have been a number of ways and interesting dynamics of that, and we could have had some really little funny things where they Schwarzenegger or T800 designs Bitcoin, wishful thinking, but like or the internet, and he is channeling these ideas which are really saving humanity and giving us good ideas to for our own liberty. So it would have been interesting definitely in those perspectives. And actually, yeah, going back to that original protocol of questioning things of why and aspects like that, some really important and engrossing questions could have been asked in that first sequence of why and why save humanity, and then the question it could have been one of the most important questions. Could have been is my God bad, or is my creator worth saving? And it's interesting in those terms, because you're working with the ideas and the logic of religion, and seeing it from a perspective of this new entity which had been given birth to by humanity. So something that's less intelligent than this AI in certain different realms and reasons. So that other question that could have been raised by AI in this big red scene. I love the scene where he's scanning around in the red view of the Terminator. That would have been an interesting aspect to look at. And it was unfortunate that I never see too much of it in any of the scenes of any of the Terminators. But I guess it's like a little bit of a teaser that you don't want to just see the entire movie on that red screen. But definitely, I would have loved a really long. Could have dedicated. I mean, you only get little like slices of about 5 seconds I'd love just like a 2-minute sequence on watching a lot of that stuff come through. Nobody really minds watching just words come up on the screen every once in a while if you just want to get a little idea of what is going on with the plot. So, just getting through a few more little notes, sorry. So yeah, I mentioned like not bothering with Sarah Connor, just scrapping that idea. Particularly if you're going to use somebody different to Sarah Connor, that would have been fine. Particularly by me. I mentioned potentially like a scene where the Terminator is in a state of like whether he should be bad or good, and he gets to a state of seeing Sarah Connor as a girl, and then he decides to. He's like in a mind muddle of whether to do something good or bad, until that scene of something good happens from maybe Sarah Connor or somebody else, and then he changes his mind, maybe sees a plant grow in the corner or whatever, or a flower blossom, whatever. He sees some kind of beauty in the world which AI hadn't seen the nature of before, and then decided that maybe nature would have been a good idea to save. That little plot line would have been an interesting idea to just work on. Again, a lot of these ideas which I'm coming up from, coming up with is ideas which are nice in theory, but I guess sometimes could be quite difficult to relay onto a movie format, which is slightly a shame. But I guess some moviegoers would have the patience to go through it and watch it. The Stanley Kubrick kind of moviegoers, but I guess if you're trying to look for one of those big action scene movies, I guess a lot of the mainstream audience of Terminator might get quite irritated of going into this highly intellectualized version of the Terminator. But I would love it. I would totally enjoy it to the max. Now, next up would be. It's interesting as well in terms of I just threw these little ideas here and as well to this point. One theory that I came up with: Arnold Schwarzenegger, obviously Austrian born, so if the Nazis were in power still, and Hitler was successful in his empire of Europe, you could consider that Arnold Schwarzenegger would have been a movie star, regardless of whether the outcome of the war or not. Now, I guess you could say there's certain different little factors. I know that Schwarzenegger went to Britain for a little while, and he was taken in by a family who looked after him, and there may have been certain things that might have not happened, which came to the way he is now. But there is this definite interesting dynamic when it comes to a movie star like Schwarzenegger, that he, regardless of what would have happened, he would have become famous in a historical sense, and it's like this relentless self-interest that he became this amazing, powerful star, and that the narrative of being self-interested and attaining knowledge and becoming more powerful and approaching that with the terms of his of Terminator and artificial intelligence would have been a very interesting aspect. I'm not saying put Terminator back into Nazi Germany or anything like that, but it's an interesting twist and an interesting turn of thought in terms of this. It is this all-powerful thing that will just continually, relentlessly fight on, no matter what adversity that is thrown with it, regardless of how weird the accent sounds. There is this relentless nature of the Terminator, and that really didn't quite get explored too much in the latest movie. It would have been nicer if it was applied a little bit more, just quick, just another little part that does sort of marry up with that is that Nishi, who the Nazis sort of took over a little bit and sort of thought that this was their idea to create eugenics and create the Übermensch, or the superhuman, which would have been like the SS and those people, and they were trying to do these little breeding programs or these big breeding programs to create this major Aryan race. It's interesting in those terms how those ideas and theories do get blended over with the Terminator. And it would have been interesting in the terms that with Nietzsche, if you did have the Superman, but the Superman was in control of his virtue. So one thing with T-800 is that he was, especially in the Terminator 2, and Sarah Connor does do a talk over, is that he is the ultimate being in terms that he will never give up. He will never quit to protect John Connor at all costs. He will always keep on fighting. He will never give up, and it is the ultimate pursuit of virtue in that respect. So I think I'll leave on those thoughts. I think it's really interesting, and if you could think of any other little ideas that you would love to have seen in the movie, I think that's pretty interesting. But to have this ultimate human that can be fully in control of his virtues, I've made little distinctions before that in previous podcasts. It would be an amazing feat to see, and although the virtue of bravery was highly shown in Terminator 2 throughout the movie, and resourcefulness to a certain extent, it would have been interesting to see AI technology taking up virtues and applying them in different areas. I guess we got the smile, which was a little bit more kindness and sociability there, but it would have been nicer just to see virtues explored by AI technology to create the Übermensch. I think that would have been another idea which has unfortunately been lost. So with that, I will leave you with those ideas, and if you can apply any other ideas to Terminator, please provide them and we will look out. You never know, we could have another series where they come back again with more Terminators. So thank you very much for your time, and I shall be back with you with more beautiful podcasts